Divide and conquer. It's a strategy used in politics, in war. I mean, you may have even used that in your house, trying to harangue your kids. But when the president of the United States takes prime time spots on all the networks to divide and conquer his own country, the very president that said he was going to unify this country at his inaugural address went ahead and talked about the mega Republicans. Now, this is an obvious strategy for Joe Biden. They're going into the midterm elections, and generally speaking, the incumbent president doesn't do as well in those types of situations. The Democrats have the House, they have the Senate, and of course, they have the White House. So Republicans are looking to gain back either the House and or the Senate. And Joe Biden's approval ratings, though slightly ticked up a little bit, around 40%, still remain abysmally low. I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Jamil, Jivani, and Brian Lilley. That was a bit of a long preamble, Jamil, because I say the divide and conquer because it is the strategy going into the midterms that these, quote, evil MAGA Republicans are basically a threat to democracy. And then on the other side, you have President Joe Biden, who's using his Department of Justice to invade the home of his chief political rival, maybe his rival in 2024, we don't know, but the Department of Justice raiding, the FBI raiding Mar-a-Lago for all those documents. We don't need to litigate whether there was classified, not classified. That's in court right now. But Joe Biden goes ahead and calls them nearly fascists. Who's the fascist here?
You know, you're right about this being an election strategy coming up to the midterms. I think what we're seeing from Joe Biden is an attempt to separate what he's calling conservative Republicans from mega Republicans. And there are close states like Ohio, Arizona, Pennsylvania, where if Democrats can, Georgia as well, if they can take some of the Republican base or the swing voter away from Republicans, then they will certainly win. But at what cost? And I think that's the real question you're getting at, Adrienne. I mean, the cost of winning an election is vilifying a large portion of the population, turning people against each other, treating Donald Trump and the 70 million people who voted for him in the last election as if they are extremists. I mean, this is a scorched earth approach. If they even win these elections and they do take control of the Senate in November by a majority, it's still going to be like you've burned so many bridges, you've turned away so many people. What is the state of American democracy after that? It seems very short-sighted what President Biden's strategy is, and I worry, even as a Canadian, of what that means for us. I mean, we consume so much of their media, we're affected by their political culture. They seem to be festering so much anger and resentment. What does that mean for Canadians?
You know, Brian, it is a strategy. We've seen Justin Trudeau, of course, he used that to his benefit in the last election, of course, calling anybody that wouldn't take the vaccine, you know, all sorts of names, racist, bigots, science deniers. The name calling is effective. In this instance, what's going on in the United States, I brought up Mar-a-Lago and the Department of Justice because those are all things that are all swirling around the White House. And we know that Donald Trump may or may not run in 2024, but that could be Joe Biden's chief political opponent. We've seen countries use those similar tactics all around the world, and those aren't countries that we would want to emulate. And so I'm not trying to be over dramatic about this, but it seems to me that it's always the left, the liberals. They chastise those that are conservatives or on the right with their sanctimony that we're anti-democratic, we're a threat to democracy, we invoke violence. And just take a look at that image there. I mean, with the president's speech, you know, that red image, it's got a couple of Marines behind him with the Marine band. I mean, it's a bit of a departure from what normal, from a normal course for a presidential speech. But just let's sort of, you know, unpack a little bit just that narrative of evil MAGA Republicans, threat to democracy. Joe Biden said nothing about what happened in the summer of discontent in 2020 when cities all across the United States were on fire. He has not talked about the attempted assassinations on Supreme Court justice since the Roe ruling. Again, hypocrites.
hypocrites for sure. As I was writing about here in our own country, this call for decency only goes one way. And as soon as you say something that is offside of the progressive, regressive left, they turn around and scream at you. You know, Dr. Moore, Ontario's chief medical officer, called a piece of excrement by a left-wing academic for changing COVID rules that are in line with many other jurisdictions around the world. That immediately, just days after this same academic calling for respectful dialogue and chastising people that went after Chrystia Freeland, I would say, you know, chastise everyone that is acting the way that Rube was. But this speech by Biden, with the bizarre images, the, as you say, the Marines, the red, that is not normal US presidential stuff. Are we getting closer to someone that Biden doesn't like falling out of a hospital window? I hope not. But, you know, that's the imagery he's kind of going with when he does this sort of thing. And the vilification has resulted in some very bad outcomes here in this country. Justin Trudeau has used the vilification and the micro-targeting and the divide and conquer approach that he did import from the United States. He put it on steroids to win the narrowest minority government in Canadian history. Now, are the Americans looking at what Trudeau did and saying, well, let's follow that path, let's re-import what we sent up north? Perhaps, but as Jamil was saying, at what cost? What's the cost to your democracy? What's the cost to the fabric of your country, of your society? You know, you can't talk about divisions and then foment more division as a solution.
Jamil, the divider in chief, as he's being referred to in many corners now, this isn't a new tactic. We all know this has happened before. Let's just even quickly look at the former governor of Florida, Charlie Crist, when he was a Republican and then he was an independent, and now he's a Democrat. And now he just won the nomination to run for governor under the Democratic banner in the state of Florida to run against Ron DeSantis, very popular governor of Florida. Charlie Crist turned around and said, if you have hate in your heart, if you are basically a Republican, I don't want your vote. How is that a strategy to basically say to nearly 50% of the electorate, to heck with you. I don't want your vote. It's bizarre.
Absolutely bizarre. I mean, it shows that it's not really about smart politics in the case of Charlie Crist. It really does seem to be about wanting to pick a fight and punish enemies. There is this bizarre sense on the left, I think, of wanting to dehumanize people who disagree with them. That is why they use this effective language. They call people racist. They call people bigots. They try so hard to delegitimize any point of view that might be in contrast to theirs. And it seems like that's less about helping anyone or do some greater good. And it's more about just wanting to be personal and venomous and just take things to a level that I think so many people are uncomfortable with. But they've done such a good job of making it is of like gaslighting the public. Like they're the ones who actually want to build bridges and they're the ones who actually want to, work across partisan lines, when all of their rhetoric, all of their actions seem to actually prove otherwise. So in some ways, I think that they believe that they're very different from their sort of caricaturing of Donald Trump. But I think a lot of what they've been saying about Donald Trump is actually projection, because they're doing a lot of the things they said he was going to do. They're talking about their political opponents in the ways they said he was going to do. They want to point a finger at others and say, you're a fascist, but then do all sorts of things that seem to be out of a fascist playbook.
And I'm going to bring this back home then, Brian, because all of these things that we hear, how they talked about Donald Trump, you hear very similar language about how many in this country refer to Pierre Poilievre, of course, who is the perceived front runner for the conservative leadership race, which is going to conclude in 1 week's time. We're going to know who the winner is. 50% of the ballots have already been sent in. They have a few more days to get it in before everything is shut down. Over 600,000 people bought memberships. And you sort of hear this narrative about Pierre Poilievre already, similar to that, as I said, of Trump.
Yeah, it's
In the
false.
last few days, and it's false, of course, but it's suitable for a particular general election, especially that's how the Liberals will run against him. But the dying days of this campaign, um, there's a big battle on the campaigns between Charest and Poilievre about whether or not there's flour in the Nanaimo bars. Like that's where we're at in terms
Yeah.
of this election. But last few days left, what are we going to see?
Well, it sent me to Google to find out what the ingredients are in Nanaimo bars because I'd never. Oh, there's no flour in it. I don't know. I don't know how to make them. I'm a cook. I'm a chef. I'm not a baker. So I'll eat these things. I don't know what's in them. Um, Look, this whole thing about Pierre Poilievre being Trump has been going on from the beginning. And if he wins, the first thing I want to do is read Gary Mason in the Globe just to watch him be apoplectic at the fact that that Pierre's won because he's been pushing this Trump narrative. It reads like it belongs in the Red Star, but a lot of people are going to lose their collectivist little minds. They're just going to explode. I've taken issue with some of Pierre's stances, but I do that with all politicians. That's my job. So, the World Economic Forum, some of his statements about other candidates, but claiming this guy's Trump or that hateful and divisive, do you know him? Do you speak to him? Have you been to his rallies and talked to the people at the rallies? Probably not. You're sitting at home smugly judging other people and denouncing a huge swath of Canada that you don't know at all. Unfortunately, that's the way a lot of our politics, just like in the US, where they've got flyover country, that's the way a lot of our politics work in this country as well.
And Jamil, I think that there are a lot of similarities in terms of that narrative that they want to use. They see it happen, they see it quite successful in the United States. So let's use that in Canada. It's again not uncommon strategy, but it is I don't know if it will work this time. I mean, Justin Trudeau is not popular. I think he has worn out his welcome, shall we say. I think his party is tired of him. I think he is tired of even governing, if you can call him it's what he's done for the last few years, even governing. I think they're tired of the scandals. I think they're tired of the spending. I think they're just tired of all of the drama that surrounds Justin Trudeau. So it's easy to vilify Pierre Poilievre in this fashion, a la Trump, that he is divisive and anti-democratic and all of these things. I don't know if it will be as effectual this time around, because if anything Pierre Poilievre can do, he actually can fight back against those attacks. And when the federal election comes around and when the national media, some in the national media, start telling conservatives you need to act like liberals in order to win the election, Poilievre rejects that.
Yeah, and that's where the comparison to Trump is really a tool to try to influence and shape what conservative politics is like in Canada. I think a lot of people in the media, a lot of people on the left want to say, oh, you guys are starting to sound like Trump. You better become more like us. And it's like, there's actually a lot of middle ground between.
Wait till we see the comments that we get about this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of middle ground between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. And it shows a lack of nuance and frankly intellectual curiosity on the left to compare anything that's to the right of Justin Trudeau to Donald Trump. Like the majority of Canadians
liberals would be on the right of Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, I mean they'd be comparing like John Kerchen and Paul Martin to Donald Trump if at this rate. Like the truth is that most Canadians are to the right of Justin Trudeau. He has become the far left. That is his base. And so most Canadians are not like him. Most Canadians don't view the world the way he does. And Pierre Poilievre is trying to speak to that broad range of people. I hope he's successful in doing so because we do need to get Justin Trudeau out of office. But also in terms of making policy, and this is where the media has such little curiosity, look at what Pierre actually says he wants to do. He's nothing like Donald Trump. He's pro-immigration legally. He is very welcoming of newcomers, of multiculturalism. He talks all the time about the sort of economic regulations that are going to grow our economy, create opportunity for the middle class. It's just the policy world that Canadian conservatives live in is so different from the Republican world that the only way you could compare them is if you don't actually care about what we're trying to accomplish in this country.
Brian Lilley, last word.
Yeah, I think Jamil's right there. It's a lack of intellectual curiosity. There's very little of that. I think it's one of the main things that makes being a journalist, being in the media interesting, is that if you're curious, you can look into all kinds of things, learn so much. But there's a stellar lack of curiosity when it comes to covering politics, especially conservative politics. I don't want to look into that. I just want to apply the easy, lazy label and move on after I've done my smear. It's a shame.
We will have full analysis and coverage of who the next conservative leader will be in the next week. We'll know all of that information. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And log on to the torontosun.com and hit that subscribe button for more stories like this and coverage you will find nowhere else.